Do you want to learn how to create beautiful volume like this? You're in the right place. Okay, so I've worked the first 3 rows of the cuff here. This isn't full size, this is just a sample too, so you can see how it's worked. The full numbers are in the pattern. So once you've created your first 3 rows in the size that you want for this part of the cuff that will sit here on our wrists, we're now going to do our setup row for the rest of our sleeve. So we're going to chain 2 to give us enough height for our half double crochet, and then we're going to work 2 half double crochets into every stitch, and that will start to give us some of the shape that we're looking for and the extra volume that we're looking for in the sleeve. And these will act as your anchor stitches when you work your sleeve stitches, the length of your sleeve stitches. And what we're going to do is work our sleeve stitches vertically from here, so they will sit at 90 degrees to the cuff. So I'll just carry on working 2 half double crochets into each of the stitches along the top of the cuff here, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about how we're going to create the length of our sleeve. Okay, so that is row 4 complete now, and you can see that we now have twice as many stitches along the top of our cuff than we had in this original section, and each of these stitches will act as an anchor stitch for when we create at the length of our sleeve. The rows will run up and come back down and anchor into each of these stitches. So that's the stage that we're going to move on to now. So we're going to turn our work and we're going to chain the number of stitches that we need for our sleeve. The pattern will tell you how many that is. I'll just work a small number here so you can see how the process works. Okay, so now we have the main part of our cuff, we have our increased stitches here, and this will be the first row of your sleeve length. So once you've created the number of chains that you will need based on what it tells you in the pattern, we are then going to work our way back down towards the cuff using half double crochets again. So assuming you don't get into the same tangle that I do. Okay, so we're now working row 2 of our half double crochet back down towards our cuff, and I'm just going to work my last half double crochet here, and then we're going to anchor row 1 and row 2 back to the top of our cuff. So we're just going to flip that over, and then we're going to work a half double crochet into this first stitch at the top that we create, where we created our 2 half double crochets. Okay, and that will anchor row 2 into the top of your cuff. Now to start row 3, it's very simple. All we're going to do is yarn over, work into the next stitch along. You can see here we've got our first stitches of our cuff, we've got our row 4, which was 2 half double crochet into the top of each stitch. So we're now going to start row 3 of our sleeve by working a half double crochet into that next stitch along the top of the cuff. Okay, so that is the first stitch of row 3, and then we're going to work half double crochets back along here. So there is no turning chain at this end of the sleeve. We're just going to flip our work, and then we're going to simply work 1 half double crochet into each of the stitches that create the length of our sleeve. So mine looks pretty short here because it's just a sample. you will have a larger number here because it needs to fit up the whole length of your arm. So we just carry on until we get to the shoulder edge of our sleeve, working 1 half double crochet into each of the stitches below until we get to the end. And then, as with any block of crochet, we're going to chain 2, turn our work and work our way back down towards the cuff. When we get there, rather than you sit watching me create all of these stitches, we'll get back to the end of row 4 and I'll just repeat what I did at row 2 again so that you can see how it works. Okay, so we are just about there now. Let me show you how that will work. So this last stitch here where we twisted our work can be a little bit tricky just to see where to insert your hook, but because they're quite big stitches it works quite nicely. So you can see it's easier probably if you lie it flat. You've got your original cuff, you've got your setup row where you created twice as many stitches, you've got row 1 and row 2 of your sleeve, and we've got row 3. We're now coming back with row 4 and we're going to create a half double crochet into the next stitch along. So we've got 1, 2, 3. We're now going to anchor row 4 by working a half double crochet into that next stitch along. Now you might notice that you get some quite large gaps here, and there's no need to worry about that. What will happen is once we've created enough fabric for our cuff to sit like this, and then we have our sleeve sitting this way, we will use those holes just to create enough flexibility in the fabric to create the pleating and the volume that you need to give you that balloon sleeve. So I'm just going to work my way along as we have been doing, creating one row up the sleeve, turning around, come back, anchor it with a half double crochet, create a half double crochet into the next stitch along to start your next row, and then just zigzag up and down until we get to the end, and I shall meet you back there so you can see what it should look like. So once you've worked all your way along, you should have a piece of work that starts to fan out in this kind of triangle shape. We've got our original cuff here, our first 3 rows, and then we've got our setup row where we worked 2 half double crochets into each of those stitches, and then we've got the work where we've worked our half double crochets back and forward, zigzagging up and down at 90 degrees. And you can see here where you may have been concerned that you had a gap where you anchored in your even number row and it felt awkward because there was a space there. What will happen is when we create our sleeve and we seam it here, these holes are what is going to give us that volume there so that there is enough flexibility in the fabric so that it can drape over the top of your sleeve. Okay, so I'm just coming to the end of my last row now, and you can see here this gap seems quite large, but it will close up when we seam the sleeve over, and I'm just going to work my last half double crochet into the final stitch of the cuff into here. There we go. So you can see now that this is starting to create more of this triangle shape because we have twice as many zigzag rows going up and down up to the shoulder and back down to the calf as we had originally in our cuff. So I hope that has helped. If you have any questions, then please do email me and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thanks, Kim. Bye.